Hello again, my name is Reverend Gregory Holston, and this is Just Nation, a program about faith, justice, and racial issues in the city of Philadelphia and beyond. And again, I'm happy to be here with my co-host, Nia Holston, attorney from the Abolitionist Law Center, and our incredible guest today around a very important subject for all of us to really take a long look at, and it is called restorative justice. We want transformation in our criminal justice system. We want change in our system. We recognize our system has been unfair and racist in many ways. So the question is, what do we change it to that will be more fair and more just for everyone? And we believe one of the core principles for that is restorative justice. And so again, I'm glad to have these wonderful guests to begin to have a deep discussion about what that is and how transformational it can be for all of us. Nia, would you like to share?
Yes, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. We appreciate your viewership, and I just want to echo what Reverend Holston said specifically, but I want to broaden it out. We're not just interested in restorative justice in the criminal legal system. We're interested in restorative justice more broadly speaking in our communities, yes. Right? And so that's so important and so impactful. And so as we're having this conversation and thinking beyond the very specific strictures of the criminal legal system, what are the ways in which restorative justice practices are historical, that are a part of our legacy and lineage as Black diasporic people around the world and in the United States? In what ways can this be done specifically apart from the criminal legal system and within the criminal legal system itself? So I am so glad that we're here today. I'm so glad that we have our guests here. I'm really, really excited about this show. And so we're going to turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves.
Yeah, so while I start on my right here, would you introduce yourself?
Sure.
A little bit about your background.
No problem. My name is Troy Wilson. I'm a Philadelphia attorney. I've been an attorney here in Philadelphia since 1986. Brief background is I'm originally from New York City, from the South Bronx, grew up in the projects. From there, went to prep school, went to Brown University. Brown University, after I graduated from college, brought me here to Temple University Law School.
You one of them smart brothers.
I want them, that's what they tell me. And went to law school, graduated law school here, married a Philadelphia girl who's also a Temple University Law School graduate. And in 1988, we started our law firm, the year our daughter was born, and we are still in business to this day, one of the longest tenured Black-owned law firms in Philadelphia.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much. What brings you to this restorative justice conversation?
Well, during the George Floyd protests, when a lot of people, mainly young Black men, were getting arrested from the protests, myself and a group of other committed attorneys got together and decided we wanted to do something. And the task was put on me to try to develop a program. And what I was really trying to do is develop a program to get as many of those people, of our people, out of the system as quickly as possible. And while at the same time erasing their record, have no record of all of this happening, erasing their record so that they can have a better chance at a better life. And then I had connections with one of my closest friends from college, Reverend J. Broadnax. He put me in touch with someone to my left, Reverend Donna Jones, to help assist me in putting this program together, and I guess we can get into that.
And we'll talk more about it.
Yep.
Great, thank you. So glad you're with us here today.
Thank you.
And would you like also to share your name and your background and how you got to this conversation?
Okay, well, my name is Reverend Dr. Donna Lawrence Jones. I pastor the Cookman Beloved Community Baptist Church in West Philadelphia. We used to be at 12th and Lehigh as the United Methodist Church. And came to this because in 2004, we were doing a lot of work with adjudicated youth through our teen center. And we had started an education program. And what we would do is we had a grant through DHS where we could work to ensure that our young people received a high school diploma using old school homeschool method. So we registered with a homeschool company where we got all of our materials. We hired a teacher and a social worker, and we started educating kids. And in that way, our congregation could have a school without having to have a school. We ended up with 100 young people. Our graduation rate was 85% with young people who were coming through DHS and homelessness and everything else. And what made the difference was a holistic approach to restorative justice. What we did is we made sure that everybody that had anything to do with that school, from the students to the teachers to the custodian to everybody, was trained in restorative practices. And we made sure that restorative practices was not the office in the corner, but restorative practices was the way we did everything. We did everything using the practices, and what we found was the approach worked. We didn't expel anybody, and in the 17 years that we did the school, we had 0 fights. And Temple University, which I'm an alma mater of, is my alma mater as well. Both Temple and Penn did a lot of the data on what we had done with those young people. And to our, everybody's surprise, our on-time graduation rate was 85% with young people that the school district of Philadelphia said they can't even come back in the building. And we had 0 fights. We did have conflict, but we handled everything through the principles of restorative justice.
Thank you so much. We want to come back to that story much more as well. And Nia?
Yeah. To my left, we have Mr. Yaya Moore. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Oh, yes. My name is Yaya. Birth name is John Moore, but everyone call me Yaya. I'm a returning citizen. I served 27 years in prison on a wrongful conviction. I've been home for a little over 10 months. While inside, I studied the law for 22 of the 27 years, and I kept my case alive until I met these wonderful attorneys. Nia to my right had they had took my case and helped me gain my freedom. But while inside, I also facilitated a lot of programs, Alternative to Violence, Just Listening, Let's Circle Up, which is actually a restorative justice program. And I entered Villanova University bachelor degree program. I've done a lot to work on myself and change and be productive, and so I can be productive out here. And so that's what brings me to this conversation, because I actually have harmed in the ways of crime, and now I'm on the other side, doing the restorative type of practices. And so I feel like I could bring a unique perspective.
Thank you so much. So I guess the basic first question is, what is restorative justice? Anybody?
I mean, a lot of people believe it comes from African principles. It's a healing process. It's a way to designate and not talk about people as victims and defendants. It takes a different approach to resolving conflict that can be used outside of court, the court system, outside of the criminal justice system, in prisons, in schools, in communities, which I think Nia talked about. We definitely need to get into that, because I'm all about it's another way to empower people in their own communities. It can be used in that way, and I'd like us to spend some time talking about that as well. The criminal justice system is about retribution and punishment. It's not designed to deal with a lot of social ills that happen and that lead people on particular paths. So it's draconian in many respects. There seems to be almost a per se rule about we have to incarcerate people first and deal with it later. There are also, restorative justice counters the mass incarceration of black and brown bodies as well. It's a way to deal with that without physically having to process someone and their spirit and you get traumatized as soon as you get arrested and go through the whole program. And it's a way to try to keep as many of those spirits and people out of that process through collaborative work. It's hard work though.
Yes.
I want the Reverend to talk about those things too. I don't want to take up all of the time about it. But it's a way it's dispute resolution, conflict resolution. But it's done in a particular way that people take the person who does the harming takes responsibility. The person who was harmed, they meet together, they talk with respect, with love, and they resolve the problems. And Doctor?
Yes, doctor. But that's a great lead-in for you to share.
Yeah, I would shift just a little bit on that though, because restorative justice in Western society is always defined with the sense of conflict resolution. But restorative justice is about equity, and the practices of restorative justice are to restore fairness. And so when we talked earlier about the school, we did not have the graduation we had because we knew how to resolve conflict, because someone hurt somebody. But we could look at it in a transformative way, using restorative practices to make sure that there was always fairness. And with fairness, it meant that we listened, we built empathy, we addressed whatever situations, sometimes positive. An example that relates to community, for instance, we had a young lady who was in a group home, and brilliant young lady, but she was always running away. And so what the system was doing was they were about to take her from our school and put her into what they call secure placement or kiddie jail outside of the city. And we knew her as a brilliant person. She was doing well in school. Her only issue was she was always running away from the group home. She didn't do anything wrong, because when a kid runs away all the time, they didn't do anything wrong. There was a systemic problem. There was an issue of unfairness. She wanted to talk to her dad, who was incarcerated, and the system wouldn't allow her to talk to him, which made her even more angry. When all was said and done, we were able to work everything out through dialogue, building empathy, hearing her, and we were able to finally get her dad and her social worker and all those other people in a room centered on her, not as a problem, but as someone that was being treated unfairly. And it gave her the power to know she had the power to bring her dad in that room, even though he was just on the phone, but he was in the room. And the first thing he said was, "Baby, what do you want? Tell them what you want." She wanted to go to military school. And we were like, if there was anybody that needed to go to military school, that young lady needed to go to military school. And she had the grades for it. So how could the system talk about putting her in secure placement when she could have gotten a scholarship to military school with her grades? Well, she was able to do that. We were able to talk about coming out as an officer instead of a private. We were able to talk about her goals and her dreams. And we were able to help her achieve that reality. That takes it broader, I guess, because sometimes when we're talking restorative justice, we think about a person who was harmed and a person who caused the harm, and we get into the victim offender side.
Yes, yes.
But when we're really talking about the indigenous process, the whole society is involved in that. The whole tribe, the whole community, the whole structure. And it's really a problem addressing method that creates space for critical thinking about how do we restore fairness.
In some ways, we have always been doing this.
Exactly.
And we have not labeled it with the strength that it deserves.
Right.
There's always been the broken window when the guys are playing baseball in the block. I broke a few windows playing half ball and stuff on the block and when I was growing up. And there was a community on that block. What are we going to do about that broken window? Who is responsible for it? Whose child is responsible for it? The parents getting together, the neighbors getting together, everybody, okay, you did it, okay, what we're going to do to repair it? You got to go down there and apologize. It was a whole community coming together to resolve, really was a criminal act of breaking that window. But it was resolved on the block by, I don't know how to fix a window, but we do know how to do some chores in the house, in the community there. I'll do that as a payment back for the broken window. And the whole block had to watch that process happen to make sure that that young person did that. So I'm saying that this is really stuff that we've already done, but now we're doing it in a deeper and richer and kind of retrace and go back to those traditional standards and ways of doing it. Am I saying it wrong?
No, you're saying it right, but I would add the issue of equity.
Yes.
So equity says, because I played half ball on the block, because we didn't have a park that was safe to play half ball.
And that's exactly the truth too, because it was a little street, Annie Street in South Philly. We played on that street because you couldn't go to the cheap playground.
Exactly.
Because you went to cheap playground, the gangs were going to whoop you behind.
Exactly.
So we had to play on the block.
Right. So the issue wouldn't be to punish the child for breaking the window when they were only on this big of a block. The issue would be, how do we restore equity and how do we make it fair so that the kids that are on these blocks have access to the park, so that they can play half ball at the park.
Recognizing
I still had to get that window fixed though.
But if you had a park, you wouldn't have been on the block.
It
wouldn't have
recognizes
been
that there are
place, yeah.
underpinnings that will lead to that particular situation, whether it's lack of investment, historical lack of investment in the black community, in our particular, that lead to these kinds of situations, and acknowledging that, but also trying to get beyond that to resolve these issues as well, and empowering people and empowering communities in the process.
Well, I would say that restorative justice is humanity by way of community.
No, you better go ahead now. You trying to be a preacher or something?
I mean, you know,
that's a great phrase.
You know, it takes community, right? So when we feel as if we are in this web, right? Restorative justice, we talk about this web of everybody being interconnected, right? And and so how this harm either directly or indirectly affects people, and so the humanity aspect is lost when somebody feels a disconnect to this sense of community, right? And so a person is thereby easily, or the likelihood for a person to create a harm or do a harm to another person because the sense of humanity is gone, right? And so restorative justice in a lot of ways restores these virtues of humanity, right? And so while we're together in a community, I can look at you and see an aunt or a sister, or you know, I see me because you're human. And so these virtues of humanity, right, by way of community, right, is what restorative justice is. You know,
that's well said. Neil?
Well, I mean, there's so much that's kind of percolating in my mind because, you know, we have this restorative justice binary of, you know, victim and offender, which we've talked about, and even just like maybe a conflict between one or two people. We talk about that, think a lot about how it is about so much more than that, and what is coming to mind for me specifically is the ways in which not only is this an alternative to the criminal legal system, but it is our traditional restorative practices have been burdened by the criminal legal system because it has specifically taken away community. You've talked about, you know, you mentioned, oh, well, this thing was a criminal act. Well, it was a criminal act because people criminalized it. And prior to that, it was not a criminal act, right? And so and it's a criminal act for some, right? And not others. And so I'm just thinking about all of the ways, and because social bonds are broken down
Yes.
by the criminal legal system
Yes.
specifically, if we're going to be talking about restorative justice, we also have to talk about that specific fact that the criminal legal system is responsible for producing some of the effects that we see because those social bonds are broken down, because that trauma is unspeakable. And so even when people are coming in to do the restorative practices, if you're not specifically responding to that, it's difficult.
That's you mentioned a great thing, and that's one of the reasons why when we did the program for the George Floyd and the Wallace protests, the first thing in my mind was I have to get as many of the players in the criminal justice system away. Get them away. I had conversations. A judge was saying, "I heard you putting this thing together," and I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, how are the judges involved?" I told him, I said, "Y'all ain't involved. Y'all you kicked to the curb for this. Don't worry about it. You'll be involved with the cases that are in the system processing. That's where you need to be. No judges, no probation officers. In a certain level, no prosecutors. Okay, no parole officers. Anyone who's involved in that part of the system, I want to keep them as far away." And I told the judge, I said, because historically, people in your position have been harmful to me, people that look like me, traumatize me, not just me, but traumatize my family, traumatize my community. Take this brother off the street, he married, he got a family, everybody's affected. And I tell judges all the time.
Hundreds of thousands of people were affected by that.
Right.
As a pastor in the community, when somebody is taken away that everybody knows didn't do it, everybody knows, you are affecting thousands of people who see that injustice and feel helpless.
Right. So it's just, anyway, that was to me that was the major component, because I see restorative justice as well as a way to fight not just mass incarceration, but the institutionalized disease of institutional racism that permeates and affects the criminal legal system. This is just one manifestation of dealing with that. That's the way I looked at it, and I said, well, if we're going to put this program together, you got to try to keep that out away as much as you possibly can. The program that we had was not per se restorative justice. It was I consider it a hybrid. From talking to you and learning from you, a hybrid, because restorative justice is really, for me, is community based. It has nothing to do with the criminal legal system. Y'all do what you want to do. You could try to do with it, but we're going to deal with it, solve our problems within our community. We running this, not you.
So let's dive just a little deeper.
Okay.
So what's not restorative justice?
Well, before we dive all the way deep, I want to respond to what Troy was saying, because first of all, appreciate greatly his passion for understanding how unfair the system was. But I also want to make sure we hear the data. 3 years later, people with felony convictions from that arrest because of what this man did, we have, the people who went through the traditional system, 56% recidivism. The people that went through the restorative response program, which is a little different, 19%. When people are able to do 19% recidivism, so that meant the traditional system that says you go to court, you get charged, you spend time in jail, whatever that was, those folk got, the people that went through the punitive system, 56% of them recidivated.
And
they got rearrested.
They got rearrested. They got back into the system.
And there's a national study now that has it at something like 40-some%. It just came out of people with particular type of conviction, felony, larger scale felonies than we dealt with. It was still nearly a 50% recidivism rate when they went the regular route. When people do the restorative justice route, the recidivism rate tends to be 10 to 12%. With the hybrid that we did, the recidivism rate was 19%. So that meant there was a 37% difference, 37% more people that went through the judges and the POs and had their lives and families harmed greatly, went back and committed the same type of crime. Of the people who went through the restorative response program, it was 19%. And of similar folk that went through straight up restorative justice, it was under 12%. It was 12%.
So in the restorative justice program, 81% of the people that went through that program did not get rearrested.
No.
And you're believing it's because of the program which provided community as a way of supporting and helping that individual be able to move forward.
Our
in life.
program provided community, but our program also provided services. A lot of people get arrested. Hey man, you try to keep a roof over your head. They need food in their stomachs, and
Yes,
they need a job. So our particular program built in there was what you need. You need food, we had a food bank. What you need, emotional support services, we had that. You need a job training, we had that. We had, with Jeff Brown, ShopRite, we had him, I cajoled him to give up at least 200 jobs, waiting for people in that program, waiting for them. Free jobs, supply, you get the job. So those are some of the things we helped with housing assistance as well. So it was a hybrid, that's why it was a hybrid program, because we understand that when you're involved in a lot of these situations, you have other things that you're working with. You cannot focus and concentrate on restorative anything if your stomach is not
hungry.
full.
Right.
You can't, if you don't have a job to provide for your family. So I was like, oh, no. We got to deal with some of these things. We brought in some other nonprofits and some other folks and organizations to help with the program. And I think that was another reason why it ended up being pretty successful.
So again, what's not restorative?
Punishment is not restorative justice. If you think about, let's say I had hurt my hand, okay, and I have gaping wound, and I'm diabetic, and that wound will not heal. And you just get a piece of cloth and put it over my hand. Every time I move my hand, it will hurt.
Yes, it will.
And it also won't heal. So over time, whatever infection inevitably develops takes over my whole body and I die. The retributive system is like that. All they do is cover up by throwing somebody in jail. They cover up by removing somebody from the rest of the body. But when they remove people from the rest of the body starts to die. Restorative justice notices you hurt your hand. And first of all, it recognizes right here, this is where the issue is. What do we do to repair it? And we're not thinking about how to get a knife and hurt you more. We're thinking about what needs to happen. We're using medicine, we're using everything we know to say, how does this hand become repaired so it can function again?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say restorative justice also is not the cure-all, but the step forward. You know, restorative justice, many people are under the impression that because of the name restorative justice, without having really a deeper insight to what it actually entails, it feels like it's supposed to change everything.
For everybody.
But it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix, and it takes the grunt work.
You're not going to fix 250 years in this country, you know, in one session or whatever. But it's, like I said, it's something else to use, another tool for us to use. There are also programs like, I don't know if you want to get too deep into it, like 46 jurisdictions in the United States have some form of what they could categorize as restorative justice. So primarily the ones that have it, the focus is juvenile-centric as opposed to adult-centric. People feel like, oh, we can do this for the kids, but we can't do this for the adults. I'm like, we showed with our program that you can do it for the adults as well. Philadelphia has a formal juvenile program in restorative justice, and obviously we did it for the adults. So that's just something that people need. So it's out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Were you?
Yes. No, I was just saying that it's not a quick fix, and people just need to actually learn more about the practices and the procedures and things like this, and know that it's a solution. But it's not overnight. It's not overnight. So,
it takes time.
And if we all come together as a community, then it can start working.
Well, can we talk a little bit about we hear a lot about restorative justice circles and what that meant. And you specifically, in your opening, you talked about how you have gone through restorative justice circles and trainings and have become a restorative justice coordinator. And so if you could share a little bit about your experience about what that was like going through those programs and then now becoming a coordinator, if you can share a little bit about that.
Okay, so on the inside, restorative justice is, first, many people were under the impression that restorative justice was about, strictly about taking accountability and admitting to the crime and all of these different things like that. And so while in there, some people actually felt like, well, we're not going to ever see the people we harmed and stuff like that. And so we had to actually really enable people to really realize that it's not just about the people you've harmed, right? It's about yourself as well. You know what I mean? And so when we talk about accountability in restorative justice, it's just not about you, blame, shaming. It's not about blaming, but this accountability is also giving somebody, acknowledges that somebody is a whole human being, right? And they are not the sum of any mistakes that they've made or any mishaps that they have made. And so when this person, we give these persons the tool and let them start to feel whole, let them start to feel a part of the community, they can start recognizing, right, others. See, it's like you can never really fully grasp humanity unless you see it in somebody else. Unless you could grasp the humanity within someone else, that's when you know you're deserving of it.
Yes.
That's when you know you're deserving of it. This process was taking place on the inside, right? We had to actually get people's minds out of this idea of it's just about confronting the victim, and it's about being able to see others as humans so you can see yourself as well as a human being. And then if you see yourself as a human being, you act accordingly.
Yes.
Definitely.
That's
Even with our
100%.
program, we had to re-educate the attorneys who were going to participate in the program, represented people. They start talking about, the defendant this and restitution. And I say, hey, no. If you're really coming from a restorative justice perspective, those words are dead to me. You have to recategorize, you have to rejigger your brain and think on a different level and stop categorizing people with those kinds of words to start off with, and then you go from there.
I think the power of what this was just said is clear. This is more than a program.
It's a way of life.
Yes.
It's a way of life. And that's very important. This is an indigenous process. This is the way our societies worked before Greece and Rome decided this is, I always get a little tongue-tied in talking about this because we can get stuck in the criminal systems. And yes, there's a place for restorative justice in the systems where direct harm was done by an individual with another individual. But also, justice is about equity with the lens of fairness, with the tools to create fairness. Now, we take the same principle of building that equity and we apply it in the healthcare system. We apply it in the education system. We apply it in the block system. In the carceral in every single way, because we are humans, as our brother has said. And Howard Zur is called the grandfather of restorative justice, a white guy from wherever he's from. He ain't the grandfather. The grandfather looks more like the people in this room. Because this is the way our communities operate. We had a chance to travel to the motherland, or we had a chance to travel to anybody's motherland, and you look at how our children are educated. Are they educated in rows behind desks? No. They're often educated in circle, sitting together. So
go a little deeper into what a restorative circle is as one of the practices.
Okay, so a restorative circle is a circle that is that consists of primarily the person who has harmed and the person who has been harmed, but other stakeholders, right? It could be the family members, it could be a person who owned the store up the block, It could be, the person that sits at the corner every day, doesn't even say anything, but can share some wisdoms, right? And so the circle consists of community members, right? Community members who were either indirectly affected or directly affected, and so there's this process of talking about accountability, and then it's these skits that are played out, and being able to identify, well, if this would have happened, what would you have done in that aspect, and giving people provoking thought, right? Provoking thought, not really imparting any knowledge on somebody, but really, really facilitating a circle in a way to provoke thought. Really, really, first it builds community, right? You sit in a circle and we get to know each other, because at times, sometimes people, if everyone don't know each other, it's hard for people to really, really give some of themselves, right? So it's the initial process is first build a community, and then after we build this community, right, and we get to know each other and knowing each other's names and things like this, and that's when the work begins.
And I love the way you said provoking thought, because remember, I'm always the voice to take it beyond criminal systems. And we talked about, we have restorative practices and restorative justice processes happening in community meetings to provoke thought. The community is coming together using restorative processes to achieve justice in the neighborhood by addressing the fact that we've got 3 cameras and we need 4. Doesn't mean somebody was particularly harmed. Sometimes we just need to provoke thought to say, how can we make this better? How can we make this more fair? How can we make this more equitable? So I'm always a champion for having the conversation. Yes, criminal systems, yes. Criminal behavior, yes. But medical as well. Your family is dealing with Pop, who has just been diagnosed with something, and nobody knows what to do, and nobody's talking to the family. You ask for a circle, and you want to have the physician there, you want the medical social worker there, you want auntie there, you want the imam there, and everybody is a process for provoking thought to make sure that there's equity. And that's justice. It's not saying that auntie did something wrong or pops did something wrong, but it's saying, how do we provoke thought so that critical thinking happens with the people in the room that are most impacted and empowered? And when that happens, there's less times that you're having to come back and sue somebody.
Well, can I add something else as well? There's another component when all these things go right. There's a community. There's a feeling of empowerment that takes place in the community.
Yes.
Oh, we did this.
Yes.
Also, to me, that also means, oh, we can do this again.
Yes.
We can do it better.
Yes.
We can bring more people in our community. So ideally what will happen is the communities will be empowered. The communities will run things. This ain't about the DA. It's not about, but I tell you before, in the beginning, then it becomes, it's not about the DA. It's not about the judge. It's not about the police. It's not about a parole officer. It's not about a probation officer. No, we're gonna handle this ourselves. And that way, the community can handle if there's a conservative DA who wants to lock everybody, go back and lock everybody. It doesn't matter, I don't care.
I'm
whatever.
not calling the cops, so he ain't
We're
never
not
gonna see
calling the
him.
cops. We're gonna handle this within ourselves, within our community. We are one, so we'll deal with this as one entity and one community, as one community, because of that empowerment and the success that we've had.
And it seems that other communities have that process.
Yes.
And we have been systematically being stripped of us doing that process in our own community. That in some ways that's a part of what racial the discrimination, racial white supremacy has done. It stripped away the institutions that help us be able to resolve our own disputes, to restore people back to the community. Am I hearing you correctly when I
Yeah, you are, but I mean, and there are ways that some jurisdictions, but even within the context of a criminal case, will say, well, we'll do some form of restorative justice. We'll do it in the beginning, or if somebody gets sentenced, we'll do it at the end when the person has been sentenced.
Yeah.
As I said before, that's not restorative justice. That's not what. That's something else. That's a hybrid, but I don't know what that is. But that's not that.
But I was trying to yes to all that. But I was trying to deal with. I remember a scene from The Godfather.
Okay.
Where the individual had a dispute with a landlord, and so they didn't go to the courts. They went to the Godfather, and their own Sicilian traditions asked the Godfather for justice, for fairness.
Exactly.
And the Godfather dealt with that landlord so that they were so the money was brought back and fairness was gotten. Now, obviously, that has a lot of other implications of the Godfather, but there was some structure in their community to get justice that was independent of any kind of criminal legal system. And I'm saying I see these kind of things in other communities, but it seems like that's been kind of stripped away from our own community. And I know we used to have that. You know, so restorative justice is trying to really reinstitute what we already had.
And I don't think we ever lost it. I think it's in us. I think that's why we know that the systems that impact us are unfair. We know it here because we have the cultural memory that this, whatever this is we about to do, ain't right. This is not right in here. We know, so I've been, I'm a survivor like many people. I've had harm done to me. One case of physical harm and one case of property harm. So when I look at that, the first harm, which was a physical harm, I never reported because it would have destroyed the whole family. The property harm, I didn't report, not because of the impact it would have had on a family, but I knew the people who did it. So then it was, okay, how do I make things right? Because the only thing we wanted was our property back. So we handle that ourselves. We handle that ourselves before we knew the word restorative justice. How many times in our communities do people handle things themselves anyway? It's in us to do. We're slow to call the cops. We're slow to involve others. And sometimes people make us feel bad about that, but that's because in our hearts, I think we believe we can do a better job. We don't want folk locked up for life. We don't want families destroyed. We don't want people shot and killed. We don't want people going to the death penalty. We don't want those anyway, and I think it's because it's in us. I also think it's in Irish people, Latin people, Asian people, because I think it is the way humans work, like you were saying. Somebody was talking about humanity. You know, so what we're talking about is that's why I'm always pushing against language with restorative justice that centers in with a lens of criminality. If we can have that language of restorative justice that centers in humanity, that centers in thought, critical thinking, a process that allows us to work through stuff so that it can be made right.
So I'm curious, and Yaya, I want you to jump in here because particularly with your work with Just Listening, which is an organization that trains people in listening practices and empathy and things like that, and you also are a published author with some of the folks from Just Listening as well. And so, I hear a lot about restorative justice circles and what it looks like, and I also, what's floating in my mind is thinking about the government entities that are trying to employ restorative justice practices and principles, or are seeking funding for it, or co-opting is the word that I'm looking for. But what does it take to be a part of a restorative justice circle? And so I would like it if you talked a little bit about your work with Just Listening, and the training that you went through.
Okay, so Just Listening was a group that had started over at Graded 4, and then when Graded 4 got transferred into Phoenix, we were training people on how to listen effectively. And so many people really don't understand in ways that we don't listen, right? And so sometimes when we listening to people, we have our inner monologues. What we're really doing is we're thinking about the to-do list. We think about a conversation that we had with somebody, or a conversation that we're going to have with somebody, you know, and these different things like this actually keep us from listening effectively to the person. Then we also listen with ego, right? We listen with an ego and don't even know it. We're quick to give a response. We're quick to tell somebody advice. We're quick to tell somebody, oh, I remember when they happened with me, right? Taking away the attention from the person and putting it on us, right? And so also we listen with social culture filters, right? A lot of people like to think that they don't judge, but we do. We judge by people walk, by the way they talk, by what they're wearing, you know. And so, but this just listening is a way that we let people become aware of these ways that we don't listen, right? And of course, there's these other drop boxes, kind of like workshops that was about humanity, curiosity, empathy, love, you know, and things like this. And so that's kind of like the structure of just listening. And so based upon these workshops that we were doing, we wrote a book.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Powerful.
Yeah.
I would assume that to do restorative justice, that listening is key, and therefore these practices would have to be encouraged and learned by all of us.
Yes.
Indeedy doody.
And particularly getting away from the binary of this person has done the harm, so they're the ones who have to learn, and me as the attorney, or me as the, you know, any kind of facilitator have nothing to gain or have nothing to learn from this experience. But even being a part of it, you know, you have to also engage in those principles as well, and recognize, you know, the harm and you know, the brokenness that, you know, and the trauma that we're all facing and experiencing, you know, and just breaking down those binaries, because so much of what I have done in my career is downplay trauma or downplay harm that I may have experienced, because I'm like, well, it's not about me, it's not about me. But really, we have to look internally and see what's happened in ourselves. What have we been exposed to? How has that affected how we view the world? How has it affected how we view ourselves? And so really what I hear in this conversation is it's about, really it's just so much broader than the criminal legal systems as we suggested. And you know, the work that Attorney Troy Wilson has done is so impactful and important and powerful. And yet we still need more, and yet we still need more of it, right? And need to look internally as well. And so, yeah, that's just kind of what's percolating in my mind.
So you know, I know you work for the Abolitionist Law Center, and you consider yourself an abolitionist, and the abolition folk want to get rid of this criminal legal system. So restorative justice, when people ask, well, if we don't have this system, what's going to replace it? I always say restorative justice. That in a way that this will replace what the punishment and the punitive nature of the criminal justice system, so that it literally fades away as this practice becomes more prominent in the ways we deal in our own communities. I want to hear what you may have to say about that, Nia, in particular.
I mean, I think, you know, there's that often repeated quote, is the system broken, or is it working exactly the way it was designed to? And I would certainly say, yes, it is. It's a system not about, you know, it's not even about punishing that individual person in front of you. It's about the ruling class building and maintaining their power that they have, and how they wield that power against those without it. And so really what we're getting into is a completely different you know, often people will talk about a social contract of like, you know, this is not the system that we want. This is not a system of winners and losers and people who have power and people who don't have power. What we really want is to build community and solidify community and make sure those bonds are there so people are able to grow and to thrive. And so restorative justice certainly is a part of that, but it's not the only part. There are other there are other parts of it as well that are so much broader than you know, victim and offender, what we've been talking about, but are really about the equity, as you mentioned, really about providing people with health care and their basic needs, but more than their basic needs, right? And so, you know, that's sort of what is percolating in my mind in response to your question. And while we have this criminal legal system, are we really going to be able to get to that? I think the answer is no. It's just a flat out no, because it is based on building and maintaining power. We've talked about it on this show. You know, the people that see themselves as losing out when we decarcerate, because now the jails are emptying, and now there's fewer jobs, or they can't, you know, expand into the booming field of criminal justice, right? And so, you know, even in thinking about all of that, you know, we know that this is a system based on maintaining power. And so restorative justice certainly is a part of that, but I would say it's not the only part.
Well, thank you for the answer. I bring it up so often because people are having difficulty seeing out of this framework of this system, this adversarial system that's been only here in our workings for the last 250 years, and certainly has not been very productive for us as a people. But people need to be able to see, okay, where are we going?
People first I think there's a process though. People need to recognize it. Sometimes I have to jar people and say, hey, hold on. Is the current system working for black people in this country?
No.
Most universities, no. Okay, so if something in your life ain't working, the smart thing to do is, I got to put that to the side.
Yes.
I got to make a change. Then you go into what you're talking about, the alternatives.
And I think people want to hear that conversation. Those 2 points, I think they're there. They want to talk about what's next. And I like the way you said it, because you said this is part of it, but it's not the full answer. And
transforming our internal selves is a part of it, like what Yaya was specifically talking about, that transformation process.
And when you mention so many times we get stuck with restorative justice and like at the tip of this little piece of whatever that is on the floor. But if we look at this whole, we're seeing a very intricate, this rug has interconnected pieces. And you've talked a lot about binary, where restorative justice is more like string theory. It recognizes all of the interconnectedness. And if all of the interconnectedness is connected, and all of what we are, our thought processes, we have a natural ability to move toward wholeness.
Yes, we do.
It is natural. Racism and racist structures took away what for us is natural. But the string theory is still is still present. And what string theory says is that no matter where we are, no matter what we're looking at, it's connected. Bottom line, and they've found out scientifically
earlier with the hand.
With the hand, it's all connected. So if we look at restorative justice not as simply here, simply there, simply someplace else, but a process and a tool, because it does include a tool. Restorative practices is the tool that allows us to implement restorative justice values, principles, and techniques, which influence transformative justice, which brings the whole together. We can't do one without the other. There are people that say they do restorative justice without any restorative practices. That's not restorative justice, because there's no tool for it. Because the tools of restorative justice bring about that equity.
Well, we talked about the circle as being one of the tools.
Circle is a tool.
Yeah, can you talk about any of the other tools quickly?
They all fall into circle.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
but there are many types of circles. So you've heard Troy talking mostly about peacemaking circles or mediation circles where there is a victim or someone harmed, there is someone who caused the harm, formerly called the offender, and that's a type of restorative circle that leads to justice in that particular situation. There are community circles. There are family group decision-making circles. When there are families, a young lady I talked about earlier, she didn't commit a crime. She needed help. So when we look at it as a whole, now we're all of this is connected into a restorative justice framework where people have the power, the freedom, and the liberation, do not need to call the cops, can deal with stuff on their own terms, and get stronger.
Yes.
Because they realize, I can figure that out. I don't need these systems over here that hurt us.
Absolutely.
The other thing is what it is not and what it is. We want to make sure also in restorative justice work, it requires people to actually voluntarily participate. It can't be imposed.
Right. And that's what some hybrid criminal
Exactly.
systems do. They make it mandatory for a defendant
Right.
to
It doesn't work.
participate. And then that's why I said that's not.
That's a punitive system.
Yeah, it's a punitive
Everybody
system.
don't want to do it.
Retribution.
Yeah, and the model that Troy presented 3 off-ramps. You could do it this way, traditional restorative justice. You could do it this way through community service and community relationships, restorative response. Or you could say, no, I'll go to court. People weren't beat up based on their decision.
Right.
The people that were hurt were also given choice. You can be part of the circle. You can send your employee to be part of the circle. It's just
And
a
real
lot
quick,
of choice.
we in our
And so
system.
we got about 3 minutes left, and so I want to give everybody an opportunity to get their last thought in before we get ready to close. This is a powerful conversation, and we'll need to come back to it even more as we talk about how we move forward with real restorative justice and restorative practices here in Philadelphia. Troy Wilson.
I was just going to say, with the program that we developed in Philadelphia, we saved hundreds of souls, literally.
Yes.
Got them out of the system.
The preacher like hearing the saving souls.
But I call it a soul. My criminal defense work, I'm saving a soul, bro. And we got them out of the system, and more importantly, we also got their records clean. So it is as if their arrest never happened, and
Yes.
they were able to lead productive lives.
Yeah, because of
Just
the-
your last words.
Okay, Troy's work fed into something that's happening in Philadelphia, the Restorative Cities movement. Our goal is that Philadelphia become a restorative city grassroots, not from a nonprofit down, but from the porch to City Hall. We had already started doing the training to make sure every man, woman, boy, and girl in Philadelphia knows restorative practices so that they recognize restorative justice and recognize their power. And we're grateful for working with Brother Troy and also with the district attorney on helping the community to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, as somebody who participated in Let's Circle Up on the inside and Grady Ford and now Phoenix, and most of the people who are housed in Phoenix are predominantly from Philadelphia. And many people who were in these circles are home now. And so I would like to see a more collective
Yes.
coming together from the men who actually took the courses and stuff like that, and that's coming together and continuing the restorative practices.
Yes.
Excellent. And
Absolutely.
Nia.
Absolutely. I mean,
Got 1 minute.
I'm just thrilled with the conversation and what we've been able to talk about in this session. It's so much more expansive than just this. It needs more time, but I'm also just grateful that we've been able to give our viewers an insight into this and think about how it affects the self. And how that it broadens out to our overall communities. So I just want to thank everyone for
and
watching.
we thank you for all watching this very powerful program on restorative justice. These practices can make a difference in our community. Right now, legislation is in Harrisburg talking about how to implement this process instead of our criminal justice system as we know it. Let's all get behind it and believe that we have the power to be able to heal our own community. Thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you next time.